That's at least that's good. That's for sure.
He didn't say Mr. Harper and Mr. Mulcair. He just attacked.
And that's
Thomas
the angle
Mulcair.
that the Liberals should be taking, because if this is going to be an argument about symbolism, then yes, I understand their history with this, because it does go back through to the 1980s and all the rest, and the Jean Charest government that just left was the Quebec Liberal government, and he had replaced it after it had been removed. So I mean, I do understand that, you know, you can make your points with it, but just don't beat up your fellow opposition members, you know, on either side, whether you're NDP or Liberal. It just seems senseless at this point.
Yeah.
You know.
Now that having been said, Mike, like Stéphane Dion is not exactly, doesn't represent the mainstream or the norm of the Liberal Party. You notice how he could have made hay on Harper and Mulcair at the same time, but he chose just to attack Harper, which is something that a Jack Layton would not have done. He would have attacked he would have attacked his Liberal opposition counterpart as well. Stéphane Dion restricted his attack to the Conservatives. I like that. However, the Liberals as a party are going to introduce a private members bill in Parliament to seek the reaffirmation of the Clarity Act.
Right.
And we remember what the Clarity Act is. It was the Chrétien government, after the referendum, I believe it was in '95, put together the Clarity Act to prevent similar referendums from happening the same way.
This is another area where the NDP and the Liberals could end up at butting heads, because the NDP have the Sherbrooke Accord, and it does affirm something different than what the Clarity Act did.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
That's more dangerous.
Here's the thing. The Liberals have very little to lose in Quebec right now, correct? And a lot to gain. The NDP has everything to lose in Quebec. Okay? So we see the Jack Layton never wanted to support the Clarity Act. He never did. Right? The Clarity Act is when now the government has passed it as law. It requires Quebec to have a substantive majority, not 50% plus one, something more like 60%, a clear majority.
Yeah, it doesn't.
On a clear
I think the words are a clear majority, but it doesn't actually delineate what a clear majority would be. But obviously, their argument is
commonly
that
taken to
it's
be
something
about 60%.
more than 50% plus one.
It's commonly interpreted as 60%, as far as I know. But you're right to point that out. And it also demands a clear question, because the question in '95 was fuzzy. Do you know what I mean? And incidentally, it was Stéphane Dion under Chrétien who championed the Clarity Act in Quebec, which turned him into a pariah in Quebec. And people think it was what scandal? That advertising scandal? What was it called?
Oh Jesus!
Whatever. Anyway, it's escaping me right now. But the point of the matter is, people always think it's that scandal that ruined the Liberal Party in Quebec. It was the Clarity Act that did it. Right? It makes them the enemy, and then everyone else gets the,
It's kind of curious, because when you think about it, it's almost like on one level, Quebecers, probably the majority of them, don't want to separate, but on another level, they don't want to also be told by Canada how they could go about it.
They may not. Yeah, exactly. They may not want to separate, but they also don't want to be dictated to.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I think the Clarity Act is good for Canada. The Liberals lost that province to do it, and I think it was the right thing to do. Stéphane Dion was the champion of that. That is why, even as a Liberal leader from Quebec, he totally lost that province, because he's the guy that authored and championed the Clarity Act. Anyhow,
he must be popular enough in his own riding, because he's still there now as an MP. So.
But we see this is, again, when the Liberals seek reaffirmation of the Clarity Act, obviously the Conservatives are going to vote against it. The NDP is also going to vote against it. They have a tightrope to walk to maintain their support in Quebec, But the thing is, and the Liberals, the Liberals may think this is going to play really well in Montreal. This is going to get us seats in Montreal, because Montreal is half Anglo,
right,
and doesn't want to separate. No way, no how. Quebec City, on the other hand, is that separatist.
Yeah,
but you can see the chasm opening up between the Liberals and the NDP here, because the Liberals are trying to lay siege to the NDP fortress in Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the thing is, the way this plays in the rest of Canada too, it makes the NDP look like the Bloc. They can't say that they're against Quebec separatism. They can't say that they want to see a
put
flag
between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly.
They know that if they back down, then their Quebec support could drop, and you don't want your Quebec support to drop when the vast majority of your sitting MPs are from Quebec. And on the flip side, let's face it, there's a lot of irrational anger over this issue too. So many people, absolutely. As soon as you mention Quebec, they lose their shit and they start talking senselessly and saying things that are ignorant and rude. It's another one of these issues where that it's too politicized. It's about time that Quebecers, French-speaking Canadians and English-speaking Canadians should be able to respect each other enough to not let politicians play games with us like this.
Exactly. Yeah, so I approve of the NDP strategy of saying nothing, but that on this regard too, but it's part of a bigger plan that they have to say nothing in Quebec at all. Anyway, that can be understood outside of Quebec. Will you ever hear an English member of the NDP describing the party's Quebec policy in British Columbia, for example? You will never hear that. They will refuse to talk about that.
Yeah, but what it doesn't won't have any traction.
The NDP is going to talk French to French people in Quebec, and the message is not going to. They're going to try to make sure that message does not escape the province. But
it's an issue that we have to keep an eye on because one of our favorite issues is cooperation. And as much as it seems like there's a number of Liberal and NDP supporters that are willing to cooperate, the real question will be whether the party apparatus of both those parties are willing to find some sort of elbow room with each other where they don't have to damage each other in order to move forward.
I'm glad you mentioned cooperation because, again, that is one of the themes that we've really explored a lot in this show. And although I'm more of a free agent and you're more of a member of the NDP, that's one thing we tend to agree on for the most part, is that there has to be some coordinated effort between all the other parties to unseat the Conservatives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And although I have absolutely no axe to grind against the Liberals, and I think there's a lot of things about that party I like, I certainly don't want them to shame the NDP in English Canada with regard to their stand in Quebec, because there's a lot to lose for the future coalition, right? Because I'd like to see the NDP keep a lot of those seats. I wouldn't want to see the NDP and Liberals scrapping over Quebec and the Conservatives walk in there and take a whole bunch of Quebec seats.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
The way forward seems to be that if the NDP can defend what it currently holds and the Liberals can defend what they currently hold, and if they can both find the various ridings where where it's some will lean NDP, some will lean Liberals, and just avoid an all-out fight. I mean, obviously, I think to ask both these parties not to run candidates in all the ridings, to me, my own opinion is that that's simply not going to happen. So it is going to end up coming down to the voters. And if the parties don't recognize that and know that there's a significant portion of the Canadian population now that is so sick of what Stephen Harper has done in just 1 year, and all they want to see is to see him removed. And I think that we're going to see a stronger element of strategic voting in the next election. So if these two parties decide to play with their policies and play off against each other to fight for areas, and we end up with a stronger Harper majority, then they've done nothing for the Canadian public in general.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, my friend. And on that note, I'd like to go to a track, and then we'll come back and wrap up episode 37 of Election
That
Fallout.
Sounds good.
Okay, here we go. This is the late, great Wesley Willis, and this track is called I Whooped Batman's Ass.
Batman got on my nerves. He was running me amok. He ridiculed me, calling me a bum. I whooped Batman's ass. 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 Batman thought he was bad. He was a fucking asshole in the first place. He got knocked to the floor. I whooped Batman's ass. 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 Batman beat the hell out of me and knocked me to the floor. I got back up and knocked him to the floor. He was being such a jagoff. I whooped Batman's ass. 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 Rock over London, rock on Chicago. Wheaties, represent champions.
And there you have it. I Whipped Batman's Ass by Wesley Willis. Mike, if you were ever looking for a reason to pity Batman, now you have one.
I guess so.
I
totally forgot about that guy and his crazy music.
It's the same Casio keyboard beat for every single tune he does it.
Yeah, that's too much. That's funny stuff.
Well, Mike, I guess we can look forward to a long fall of conservative capers.
Yeah, we're going to have to stay vigilant, stay on top of what they're doing, watch them, call them on all their bullshit as usual. But you know what, Tony? I got one more thing I got to say here before we go out. And I think we should pay a little bit of respect to former BC Premier, Progressive Conservative Peter Lougheed. He was the Premier of Alberta from 1971 to 1985. And the thing I guess the reason why I especially want to pay respect to him, not only because he's passed away, but because this is a guy who didn't act like the Conservatives under Harper. He had a totally different idea about how to manage the resources in Alberta. He was he was concerned about Alberta and its interests, and his whole modus operandi is just totally different than Harper. So it goes to show not every Conservative is a complete asshole, and
absolutely, I totally agree.